Still letting a few people in. Hold on. Okay. You can start.
Everybody in?
Yep.
Good evening. Welcome again to our monthly board meetings. I'd like to have somebody make a motion to open the meeting.
I move a motion to open the meeting.
Second, all in favor? Let's all stand up. Face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have two public meetings tonight. The first one is a public meeting regarding the granting of the Cablevision television franchise agreement between the Village of West Hampton Dunes and CSC Acquisition New York. And we do have a representative from Cablevision that's on the call. Basically, this is an agreement that gets renewed, every 5 years or 10 years, Brian?
This one is for 10.
It's a 10-year agreement. It's similar to the previous agreement we've had with Cablevision. They do pay us a 5% franchise fee of the gross revenues. The differences between the contract previously and this particular contract is that they're going to be paying us biannually instead of annually. And also they're going to be providing free Cablevision services to the village, not residents, but to the village offices. So that'll include basically 914, 906, and 656A. So we'll be saving some money there, plus we'll be getting the revenue. Just as a reference, we got a check from them very recently for 24, and it was about almost $17,000. It was like $16,700. So I guess I will let the representative from Cablevision speak first, and then if anybody has any questions, but I think it's should be a pretty simple situation.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. My name's Samantha Pardell Jerez. I'm Director of Government Affairs for Altice Cablevision. We're seeking a 10-year renewal for a cable franchise agreement. The existing agreement expired December 31st, 2023. In the interim, while we've been negotiating the renewal, we've been operating under temporary operating authority, which just means that the terms of the expired agreement remain in effect until we reach a new agreement. I know you had touched on the franchise fee. A change that was made in this renewal was to remit the 5% gross revenue 2 times a year instead of the previous 1 time a year. And we also agreed to provide a $5,000 PEG grant to the village, which under federal law can be used for capital purchases for video production.
So when you say video production, it could be used also for multimedia for the meetings and stuff?
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you for adding that part in. Does anybody here? Mark, do you have any questions? Okay, is there anybody there that has their hand up and has any questions about this? Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to close the list. I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Correct.
Okay. Then our next public hearing is on a proposed law adopting new chapter 486 of the Code of the Village of West Hampton Dunes entitled Subdivision of Land and providing therein regulations pertaining to subdivision of land in the village and providing the constitution, procedures, and powers of the planning board with respect to the subdivision applications. I want to make a clarification on this, and then I'm going to let council just speak about it for a minute or two. Basically, we're putting a planning board in place because we have a pending subdivision in the village, and in order to approve the subdivision, it has to be done by the planning board. And there was no planning board previously in place for the village. So we're doing this really specifically to move this project at 738, 742 forward. And then if there's possibly another subdivision in the future, that would probably be the only other function that the planning board would be handling. Our counsel, Brian Stola, can kind of just explain a little bit about the background of this and why we're doing it.
Mayor, thank you. I think you explained it fairly well. We do not have a subdivision chapter at the moment that allows for or creates a planning board. So this law creates that planning board. It provides the criteria, standards, and the procedures that an applicant for subdivision has to go through and that the planning board considers during the process. Simple as that. The criteria that we utilized are in the code, in this proposed code, are those that are somewhat similar to other areas similar to West Hampton Dunes. We utilize those provisions and then specific provisions that are relevant towards being a community as you have being on the water pretty much for any application. So all of those considerations are taken into account, incorporated into the criteria that the planning board is going to use, and it applies only, this chapter applies, or this new chapter applies only for subdivisions. That's it.
Yes, and NICOM, which is the New York Conference of Mayors, recommended that the trustees do not serve on the planning board. It should be an independent board. So none of us will be serving on the planning board. We have some residents that have volunteered to serve on the planning board. We're not really doing this to slow up any processes. As a matter of fact, we're doing this to try to expedite the process and try to get the subdivision moving forward. Part of the goal is I'd like them to have the pilings in the ground as soon as possible, so it's least disruptive to any of the residents. We have kind of restrictions on pilings. They signed the separate CNRs, covenants and restrictions when they got the approval from the zoning board that they wouldn't put pilings in place during our season. So we'd like to help them get those pilings in the ground before our season starts so they can start construction and again be the least disruptive. So now I will open this up to anybody on the Zoom call who would like to share their thoughts about the proposed planning board and have any questions or concerns.
Chad?
Hi, thank you, Mayor and trustees and village attorney. I had an opportunity with my father to sit down. We wrote a letter that covers this, that we put in as a public comment during the public comment period in writing to the village office, and obviously any residents who'd like a copy of that can request that from the village. I think we had a really nice meeting with the mayor, and I just want to applaud him for everything he's been doing and all the great work that's been getting done, and same for this board of trustees. I think especially as it relates to the governmental relations portion and getting things done within the community at large, the other municipalities. Looking at what you've got going on with getting the road finally fixed down in the end by Cubsog is really fantastic. With that being said, I think that, we're expressing a concern here. I'm expressing a concern here about, first things first is that, there's the misnomer that's being, relayed here again tonight, that the village was unable to execute a subdivision without having a planning board. There's actually a trustee on the board who had their property subdivided when there was not a planning board, because the trustees have the power of a planning board as it stands right now. And, I discussed this with the mayor, and I know the mayor, solicited the opinion of the building inspector of West Hampton Beach about the topic of, should this village have a planning board? Do villages need to have planning boards? And Brad, who has experience in the town of Huntington and in Riverhead and along Long Island, said, your village is just too small to need a planning board, to add the bureaucratic layer, to have the expense, to put the burden on the residents. And I echo that. I think that, we have a small village, as you've seen, and, it's like, looks like it's out of the frontier west when you come down to 914 Dune Road, the one-room schoolhouse nature of the village, and instilling a 5-member planning board with 5-year terms and that exceed the terms of the elected representatives, who are beyond the reproach of the residents, and who also, are supposed to be under state law full-time residents or people who declare their residency as West Hampton Dunes. But at the same time, they should also be people with some land use and real estate expertise, in a community of 300 something homes. It just seems like a tall order, and it's all from this construct that it's necessary in order to effectuate the subdivision. That's a fact that's not true. And I think that that's really strikes a weird tone for us, and it seems wrong. And if you do, the mayor's got reasons and the board has reasons they want to do this, and I think that they should speak honestly with the public about those reasons if that's what they want to do. And then I would say, if that's the case, the bill that's proposed is flawed. The bill that's proposed on its face would make that has language in it that, for instance, stipulates the dimensional requirements of the piece of paper that the plan was submitted on, and like that's not the way the plan was submitted to the zoning board and approved. So that would just mean, from a technical perspective, that application needs a minor or major amendment, needs to be redrafted, maybe need to go back through zoning board. It's just like this unnecessary bureaucracy that gets created that like cuts a double-edged sword, because I know this board is really interested in being fiscally conservative, but the more paperwork that you require is the more paperwork you need to review, which means you need to hire somebody to review it. Which means, I guess, increasing permit fees, or maybe that gets costed through taxes. So we just put that out there that's our opinion. I mean, I have no fight in this. My father has no fight in this. We don't have land to subdivide. We could have. There was 780 Dune Road where we built a huge house there. Was large enough legally to subdivide, meaning it was greater than 40,000 square foot lot. Could have been subdivided, and we thought that was the wrong use of that kind of property in the dunes, to be honest with you. And so we're fine with limiting subdivision. That's not really the issue. It's more of a matter of just creating this extra bureaucracy that doesn't need to exist. And power sits with the trustees right now, and they can, this meeting could have been to vote on that subdivision, and they could be subdivided. So I leave it there.
Thank you, Chad. Is there anybody else who?
Robin Laveman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Robin Laveman, 929. Just to comment off of something that Chad indicated, he made a comment about that, planning board, you need to have people with knowledge and real estate background, zoning, etc. Well, if we leave it to our trustees, who are doing a wonderful job, we have people who don't have that background even now as trustees. I think that, at least from what I know, in seeking to have the planning board, the mayor did seek people with real estate background, which is more than would be from our trustees. When we had a planning board meeting previously, and the planning board was made up of the trustees, if it wasn't for your father, there was nobody else on the board of trustees that had any real estate knowledge and background. And his wealth of knowledge is a great deal, and he's always been an asset for our village. But I take exception to that, and I also take exception to the comment that there would be added cost. I don't think there's any added cost for just having a board in existence. And if they meet different than if in the prior years the trustees met. So I don't know that there's any additional cost either. But I applaud the amendment, because I think they're just trying to dot I's and cross T's and make sure we do things the proper way, as opposed to in the past. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wanted to weigh in on this issue? Brian, would you like to?
I would appreciate, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mary Jane O'Connell from 927. I'm sorry, I can't find the raise your hand icon. I would appreciate also adding to Robin's comment, because I do think that even though we're a very small village, and we do have a preponderance of people who are interested in weighing in on with expertise in real estate, we are a village that has existed, in my experience, I've been here since 1955, and I think I've seen enormous changes in the village. That's partially as a result of people who are residents here having grown very frustrated with overdevelopment and having left the village as a result. I think it's very important to have an independent planning board in particular. I do see that in terms of the composition of the board on the proposed legislation, it mentions that the Board of Trustees may function as the planning board, and has done so, I'm aware, in the past when it was necessary. I understand that's necessary as a fallback measure, but I think it's very important to have an independent group of people, regardless of an additional timeframe that might be necessary. I think that it allows the dissemination of information on what development is proposed and is taking place, rather than railroading something through very quickly without the appropriate notification of other residents of the village. And I do think it's important to weigh not just the developer's perspective, but also residents and individual homeowners who have been here for many years and have seen an enormous change in the village. Much of it to, of course, to the betterment, but also much of it to change the quality of life here as well. And I think that we exist as a village, of course, due to the initiative that was taken to help us to remain here. But I think it's important also to be aware of the preservation of something of the character of the village. And in order to do that, an independent planning board is appropriate and necessary. Thank you.
Mary Jane, I agree with you. And I think as trustees, it could potentially be a conflict of interest. And I think Erwin has discussed with us some of the people that he's spoken to, and they do have some experience in real estate. They've also lived here a long time. So I think having an independent planning board is a great idea.
Thank you. I agree. And I think that I know that that's the intention of the current administration, but I think given the provision in the article as it's drafted, it needs to be delineated or particularly explicated as to what limitation there might be on the Board of Trustees as far as whether they would function as the planning board.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to comment on this?
Certainly. Comments were made essentially that I agree with. Without a planning board, you have no subdivision authority, no subdivision control. And the other one that I think goes to Mr. Gessen's points, the entirety of the statement, and that is that under state law, members of the Board of Trustees, all members sitting here today, cannot serve on a planning board unless you adopt a law that supersedes state law. So to the extent that the village had been acting differently in the past, there was no authority for that. So now what you're doing is essentially creating that planning board, allowing in instances when necessary, you can add a trustee to that board if necessary. But for the most part, the villages that allow for that, for instance, Kings Point always has one member of the trustees on the board, on that planning board. And similarly, they have a law that allows for trustees to serve in that capacity. So without this law, you could not, on this pending subdivision application, for instance, you could not serve as the planning board by law.
So let me ask you a question. If a trustee is on the planning board, is there anything else we have to do to be able to allow one trustee to be on the planning board? Or do you not recommend it at all? We should be completely
To the extent you can avoid it,
then you should avoid it.
You should avoid it because the reasons are you want to have somebody, as has been said tonight,
Right.
independent. You want independence. You don't want to have a board making those decisions. This board is elected for different reasons other than to deal with land use issues. Let the people who are dealing with the land use issues deal with those issues.
Right.
They don't have that same bias. Let them, they're appointed for that purpose.
Okay.
So let them.
Great.
Can we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion closed.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, passed. Okay. Now that both the hearings are done, thank you for everybody's comments. I appreciate them. And we'll make sure that we consider what, was said and try to make sure that we do the right thing going forward, because that's always my intention. And again, this was put in place to try to help expedite this process, not slow it down. I just want to start with my mayor's report. I have lots of things to share with everybody. Robin has been working extremely hard. Basically, we have bi-weekly sessions with the company doing the web development. We're probably at about 65% done with our new website, and we're hoping to be launching that the latter part of next month or early May. We're just trying to get everything up there, make it much easier for everybody to find information. We're putting as much information up there as possible, and we're hoping it's a better communication tool for the residents, and an easier way for everybody to communicate within the village. I'll remind everybody again that the 2025 rental permits are due. We know there's people advertising their houses and they don't have rental permits, and that's a finable offense. I'm not looking to be a village that fines people, but at a certain point, you know you're renting your house. In order to advertise your house, you need a permit, so please just put the permit in place so we don't have to chase you down and you're doing the right thing. It's just only fair for the other people that already have their permits. Something I mentioned last meeting, and just want to mention it again, is Brian Hennig, also expressed that he thought this was a positive thing. We want to basically have alarm permits. Again, the minimum fee, I looked around at a couple of the other villages. I think West Hampton charges $100 for the first year, $50 afterwards. I think $50 is sufficient for us to have an alarm permit. We want to get everybody's information there. We want to get their contact information, emergency information, their alarm company, possibly if they have a contractor locally that can fix a problem if it goes off. And we'll be even willing to not do what West Hampton does, where basically they're starting to fine people immediately on a false alarm. We're not looking to fine people for the first, second false alarm, but at a certain point, you have to get your system fixed. But we just want to have a way to kind of control that. So again, I'm just putting that out there. If anybody wants to have any comments about it, I'm not passing it tonight. I'm just mentioning it to share it with the public. Again, I met with the Suffolk County Water Authority yesterday. They were out there. We're looking at redoing the pathway to the bay by the old Coast Guard station. It's kind of in very bad disrepair. They said they're willing to split it with us. I have no idea what it's going to cost yet, but they did give us permission to put up kayak racks. We like people to kind of keep the kayaks on the racks and neatly at paddle boards. And again, we'll probably be charging a fee of maybe about $25, which is similar to other villages. So this way you have a permit, but we also know where the kayak and what paddleboard belongs to, because we have a whole collection behind the former constabulary of people's boats that we don't know who they belong to. So if somehow they get lost, we'd love to be able to return them to you. And again, if anybody has any comments about it, please let us know. These are just things that I think make some sense for the village to move and do forward. We have a water safety CPR training plan for Saturday, June 21st. That'll be in this building. There'll be more information to follow on that.
Who's gonna be running that?
The
Ambulance.
West Hampton volunteer ambulance people will be doing that. They're the ones who will sort of use some space. Well, the swim rescue part uses some space in our building next door. Since we last spoke, the county's had some more engineers out here in reference to surveying for the West End road flooding. They're planning on starting this project in the spring to divert any of the water that's coming from Cupsog Park and collecting some of the water that's on the street by using drainage inlets and swales, and hopefully that will mitigate the problem that the residents in the west end of the village have been having with the flooding, and the county is doing that for us. I was in Albany last week. I went to the New York Conference of Mayors and the Association of Towns Lobby Day. I met with Senator Palumbo. I met with our new Assemblyman, Tommy John Schiavone. I spoke to them about a bunch of different issues for the village. Two of them are laws that we were considering proposing for the village. One of them came up at the last meeting. by Michael Craig, which is the transfer tax. In order to get a transfer tax done, you do have to get approval by the New York State Legislature, which means that they have to propose bills to basically pass this for us. The other thing I spoke about with them is as per NICOM's recommendation, there's now the allowability of a village to collect a hotel occupancy tax for short-term rentals. So this is something else that would be paid for by the actual renters, not the homeowners. And Senator Palumbo asked us to pass a resolution asking him and Assemblyman Tommy John Shabani to consider this. Any type of revenue type thing, tax that any municipality wants to propose has to go through state legislature, whether it's a red light camera, a speed camera, or something like that. So we're looking to do this. I'm not, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I'm not saying we're going to do this, but this is a multi-year process. They would have to put a bill before the New York State Legislature. The bill would have to be passed. It has been passed as per NICOM gave me sample information. It has been passed in a bunch of other villages and cities. One of the unique things here is we do not have any hotels and motels, so we wouldn't be adding onto a hotel motel tax that people are already paying. These taxes would be collected by services such as Airbnb and VRBO. The county is implementing it for any short-term rentals, so there's an opportunity for the village to get 1 or 2 percentages on a short-term rental that could help with our budget and some of our discretionary spending. I don't see this even happening until the 26-27 budget at the earliest, and that would be if the stars align and they put the bill up and they got the bill passed and the governor signed it, which probably wouldn't be till December. It would be next year, and if it doesn't happen that fast, it might be for the 27-28. But it's something that if we do now, we have the option of implementing in the future. The other thing that I was able to accomplish during lobby day was I met with Mark Patterson from the Department of State. He's the person we've been dealing with. He called me my second day in office in reference to some of the issues with the village in terms of the law, which we did get passed. That was basically what New York State would like all the villages to have their village law. We passed that. John is diligently working with the residents on the propane tanks and also the 3rd and 4th story issues. They did send us a letter a couple of months ago, and they've been very happy with our progress. And they know that we're in a little bit of a lull right now because of the fact that a lot of our residents are not here. So John's not been able to do the inspections, and some of them are working with their propane providers to fix the tanks. But we expect that probably by the end of May, June, we should have most of this cleared up. And then basically, instead of having bi-weekly meetings, we've gone to monthly meetings. Hopefully, they will be satisfied with everything we did, and that issue will be done, and the village will no longer have to be dealing with that anymore. Another announcement is our annual movie night will be Saturday night, August 2nd, 2025. If some of you there have some young kids and want to suggest some movie suggestions, because I don't have young children, so I don't know what the popular movie might be, we would appreciate your input. The village, there was a resident in the village who went to the zoning board for a subdivision at 772 Dune Road. The zoning board denied the subdivision. The resident sued the village through an Article 78 proceeding to ask that be reconsidered, and the village defended their zoning board's decision, and the courts upheld this zoning board decision that property would not be subdivided. So I know some of you with neighbors had some interest in that, so that we got that decision last week. Another meeting I had last week was with a gentleman named Jeremy Stone. He's from the New York State Department of State, and he handles grants and opportunities for us as a village as we look at you know, what we can do with some of the issues on the bay, going forward. We're trying to figure out how we can provide some type of a public benefit that will help private property, but we won't necessarily be providing something what be considered a gift to private property. So we are looking at different possible opportunities with New York State, and also I had the consultant from VHB on the call to see what is possibly available that might be able to help the village look into some of these issues and possibly get grants, get studies, etc. So I'm still trying to figure out how, if there's a way to get any public money to help the village with some of these issues. So we had a meeting, we're gonna be having a follow-up meeting in a couple of weeks as he did some research on what grants might be, if any, applicable for our unique situation where our Bayside is all private. We had our tax grievance day, February 18th. We have a Board of Assessment review, which will be now, somebody's doing basically getting all the information on all the properties that grieve their taxes, and then they will be presented to the Board of Assessment. The Board of Assessment will review them and decide if any of them warrant any deduction. However, while we were going through the assessments and the assessment roll, we uncovered a mistake that happened previously. Some of it goes back 2 years, some of it goes back 5 or 6 years, where some of our property owners somehow were not being taxed for the value of their actual structure, and they were only paying taxes on their land. And I've calculated that this is probably about $25,000 the village has unfortunately lost in revenue. So we can do what's called a correction of error petition, and we can collect the money from the people for last year's taxes. We can fix the current roll for this year's taxes. And then I will write letters to these people because I'm going on the positive situation that they probably did not know their taxes were in error, and they probably didn't know they paid their fair share of the taxes. And once we show them what the mistake was, maybe they will be willing to pay the taxes that they didn't pay. Some people have their banks pay their taxes. They might not have known that it went down. Obviously, we can't force them to pay it, but since again, we're a small community of 300 homes, I'm hoping that maybe they will consider it.
How many homeowners are involved?
Just a handful.
About a handful. And yeah, and evidently somehow when somebody entered information in the program, they changed one number and they didn't change another number. But this mistake, the problem is the mistake was perpetuated. Once we found the mistake and we did research, we found out that some of these mistakes were perpetuated for even as far back as 5 years. So basically, they were only paying taxes on the land, which is a lot less than their house was.
It was a clerical error.
It was a clerical error, but unfortunately, nobody caught it. So I'm happy we caught it, you know, and we're going to do what we can to fix it going forward and hopefully prevent it from ever happening again. We recently had our beach replenishment. I actually today was out on Cupsog with legislator Jim Mazzarella from Brookhaven and Ann Welker from Southampton, and they were absolutely amazed at how much sand was on the bay side of Cupsog. It's almost like a whole beach. They basically said people can come with their boats, and instead of having the cliffs that had all the erosion and nobody could be there, it's a tremendous beach. It's actually pretty amazing, and I hope you all get a chance to go out here, whether you're going to go do some seal watching now or come out in the summer, but it's pretty amazing what they did in Cupsog. On top of that, they also did the beach replenishment on the ocean in the village. Unfortunately, they stopped at 699 Dune Road, and that was based upon their surveys that showed that the template was basically to the max where it needed to be on the rest of the beach. There is a small area between 699 and Pikes Beach where some of the residents felt their beach is a little decimated and they should have gotten sand. So I was able to arrange a phone call yesterday with the Army Corps of Engineers and New York State DEC. And we discussed the issue and we discussed what happened. And they're going to be coming back in the fall and doing another survey. Unfortunately, the dredges have left and they in their opinion, the beach didn't require sand. The residents' opinion in this time of the year with the winter view that their beach was short of sand, but we are working to see what we can do to correct that if the Army Corps made a mistake. That's pretty much what I have in terms of the mayor's report. Next, we have the financial report. The 23-24 audit is wrapping up. The auditors, we thought we would have been done with it in February. The auditors reached out to Liz, our treasurer, asked her for a few more questions, a few more responses. They asked us to sign a couple letters to send off to our village attorneys, and that should be wrapping up any day now. Howard, myself, and Liz started working on the 25-26 budget. It's in progress. Basically, it'll be available in draft by the end of the month. We'll probably have it up on the website the beginning of April, and then we will be discussing it at the April 10th public meeting. Do you want to give the council's report?
Going to be brief and see if there's a question from the audience, but we did get some emails regarding fireworks again, which we discussed at the last meeting. Last year, as we discussed, was an exceptional year. We haven't had the 4th of July yet, so give us an opportunity to try to address it, but we understand it. And in the same respect, they also brought up, obviously, the recent wildfires, which again, as I discussed in the last meeting, the climate, the terrain, all the conditions that they have in the Pine Barrens are not what we have here. And, they had wind driven where there's just no breaks. There's just trees stacked up. So there was just endless fuel. Whereas here is if we had that same wind, from what they're explaining is because there's those gaps, the wind would actually fan the fire out because it would starve. They wouldn't have the fuel. So I just want the community to understand you really are not at risk, not to say that something couldn't happen and something couldn't burn, but the odds of this are just pretty much non-existent, to not worry. But it was also eye-opening because of the road closures for people to keep in mind. We are on a barrier island and there are limits. And with the Ponquag Bridge, they are letting some traffic over. Just everyone should kind of plan that at some point you might be stuck here for a little bit. In the past, we've gotten stuck with snow in Pikes Beach, and Gina, as a full-time resident, how frustrating it could be sometimes when we had those big snows. You could literally kind of choose which side of the snowdrift to get stuck on, but they should plan for that. The other issue that has come up where we're starting to get some of these birds that are washing up on the beach, which there is a very good chance that they do have the bird flu. We've spoken to federal, state, local, other municipalities to see how everybody else is addressing this. The county has assured us that obviously there's a health risk if you go up and you touch it. If there's a bird on the beach, there's a link to the state that you can report that bird sighting in that area. They're not going to come out for a few scattered birds to do a site visit and test. They said literally you'd have to have hundreds of birds, in an area for them to come out. So if you have a pet with you, obviously you're going to want to keep it away from the bird that's there on the ground. But as long as you don't go up and touch it, there really is not a health risk. So you really want to avoid it. The village has been discussing some other measures, which I don't think we need to get into fully yet because we're still kind of
mention that the press release.
Yeah, actually, Aaron, do you want to read that?
Yes. Well, I got a press release this morning from Ed Romaine talking about how to handle the birds, but instead of me reading it to you, Robin will post it on the website tomorrow morning. I was going to mention that. And mind if I talk for a minute or two?
No, please go right ahead.
There's a couple of things Brian just reminded me of. First of all, I wanted to publicly thank County Executive Ed Romaine, Supervisor Maria Moore, Supervisor Dan Panico, and everybody else in fire rescue who really stepped up to the plate and helped deal with these wildfires last weekend. I was getting lots of calls about them, and we were very fortunate that it was north of us, but I think they did a great job, and all the volunteer firemen that showed up and put out these fires. Our heartfelt appreciation from this village goes out to them. I wanted to thank them for that. Also, Brian mentioned the Ponkar Bridge, and I was probably the first. I actually probably was the first public official to get a call from the county, from the head of DPW, letting me know about the Ponkar Bridge, because they hadn't even reached Maria Moore yet, Supervisor Moore, and said that the county executive wanted to make sure that I knew the bridge was closing and how it might affect my village. And I said, we're fortunate, we're west of the bridge. However, I reached out to then Bob Truehold, Mayor Quag. He didn't even know about the bridge was closed, which was going to affect his village more. So I think it's very important that, we do have these relationships with other government officials, because they've really been treating us very nice and been very helpful. So you reminded me, I should have said the thank you.
It's been amazing working.
And the Ponkar Bridge is now open, for, up to, I think, 5 tons and limited traffic. So I think they'll work on repairing it. So hopefully that won't, put a crimp in anybody's summer plans going forward.
And before I forget, the St. Patrick's Day Parade is on Saturday. Plan accordingly. So if you're not attending, just read the times and know it's going to inconvenience you in some way. So plan accordingly.
Oh,
Can I,
which if you're looking for me on Saturday, I was asked to march in the parade, so I'll be marching in the parade. My first parade. Anyway, yes.
Just back to the bird flu for just a minute. I talked to Fish and Wildlife and asked them about bird feeders and bird baths. So if anybody has them, it's places where the birds congregate. So it's not recommended that you put this season that we just skip that, like you think you're doing them a favor, but if they're going to congregate, they'll spread the flu among themselves. So I think for this season, let's just not put out any bird seed or any bird baths for them. And I'm also going to look into this week. I talked to the mayor about this, about small scale where we can have somebody remove the dead birds so that we don't have a problem with our dogs. It really is. You can't put the dogs off leash because they're going to be drawn to the smell of that thing, and they will contract the bird flu. So please be very careful about that.
Yeah, I would recommend that if anybody, is walking their dogs on the beach, they should probably have them on a leash so they do not go after these birds. I mean, even we got a report elsewhere that even said that you should make sure you wash your dog's feet afterwards because of possibly stepping into any bird excrement or something like that. Then they will go back to the house and lick their feet, and you don't want your dogs getting sick. So again, any of your pets, you should probably try to be extra careful and protect them during this unusual situation. Brian, I apologize.
No, that was it.
Anything
I will
else?
wait
Okay.
for any questions at the end. I'll
Okay.
come back to you.
Does anybody have any questions specifically for Brian?
I wanted to bring something up, Brian. I spoke to the NYSERDA representative, about the
Yes.
the heat pumps.
Mhm.
I'm kind of bringing this together. Actually, on the way out here today, I followed up with her. I think I talked to you originally, or I talked to
You talked to
the
me.
building, was it you?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I talked to our building inspector, and on the 2 heat pumps that we have, one in your old constabulary and the other one in the new one. The data is still going in because I talked with Malloy College as well. They're resurrecting a lot of what they've been doing. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is she wanted to do an interview with me several weeks ago, and I wasn't ready for it because, quite frankly, I wasn't sure where the data flow was going. I didn't, and I heard that the one in the new constabulary is running very well. And I think even the old one over here is running.
The mayor can speak to that.
Yeah,
He's in that building.
Yeah, we can speak, but is this something that everybody on the Zoom call needs?
Oh.
I'm just saying, I mean, it's just, I think I don't think it pertains to them. I mean, I apologize. I think it's more of an offline conversation, but it's up, because.
They contacted me.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, but I don't think it's part of, I don't think it's up to you, but I don't think it's really part of.
Well, that's why I
Yeah,
figured I'd use, because I didn't see anything, not that should be addressed. but I didn't see where it was gonna fit, so
Yeah.
that's why.
Whatever you need from us, let us know.
Yeah,
We'd be
whatever
happy to
you
help
need.
you.
So that's what
Yeah.
that's really the message.
Yep, no problem at all.
Like, she and I spoke today, and they're gonna contact you, Robin, to
Okay.
get to John, the building
Okay.
inspector, all
Okay.
right?
They,
So I'm
they
just
did call,
bring-
they did call us.
They did already.
Yes, she did. I gave her your information. She emailed you.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Regina, I think you wanted to possibly share this. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. I just didn't want to, that's fine. I just didn't want to,
One thing, Erwin, I think would be a good idea, you mentioned about some of your meetings regarding the bay. I mean, Gina has a lot of knowledge and she's been working on it. It would be great if she could be part of those conversations. and
That's-
meetings. So
that's
I know
fine.
when you have that follow-up, I think that would be great.
That's fine. I don't know when, know what's, that's perfectly fine. I prefer, to have somebody who has more expertise on this than
That'd be
me.
great.
You know,
I
what-
always believe in hiring people that are more knowledgeable than I am.
You're very-
You know, one of the things we could just briefly touch upon, because it's gonna be in a resolution, I had talked to Erwin, we're gonna try to, we have neighbors across the street from our new village hall, and our village hall doesn't look very sharp. So we're going to do just a couple of little touch-ups on the village hall before Memorial Day to try to make it just painting the trim, putting an awning on it, a little planter, and we're gonna get rid of the cones that are out there and put a little fence so that we, so that way we just are a good-looking neighbor.
Aren't you,
That's great.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, the garage doors are all rusted, but we think we can just paint them. We don't have to replace them. So we're just gonna make it look a little bit prettier.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna go into the resolutions. So who would like to read the first
I
resolution?
will. A resolution approving each of the claim vouchers submitted for audit and approval by the Board of Trustees.
Second, all those in favor?
Resolution waiving the reading and the approving of the minutes of the February 13th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting.
Who's second?
John?
resolution authorizing the Village of West Hampton Dunes to renew a cable franchise agreement with CSC Acquisition, Inc. to operate the cable system in the Village of West Hampton Dunes. I do have a question or two about that. Do I bring it up later on? Do I bring it up now?
Well, if you have a question, I guess ask it now. I mean, we would ask it during the
One
hearing.
of the, this has been an ongoing, long-term thing that has been this, not just with this board, but previous. So one of the major problems that we had, that I had heard from residents, is the serviceability from Cablevision, meaning the ability to schedule, the ability for them to come out here, or certain, there was a lot of confusion. In any of the deliberations that preceded the agreement that we're signing, was anything discussed about their protocol on how they address turning on the systems for people that shut them down? In the previous year, I don't know.
From my personal experience, I would go on basically a seasonal system. And I would call them up, they put it on a seasonal, I'd call them back, say I'm back, and it took like seconds. They did it all electronically, so it wasn't even a service call.
That's
So-
not what I had heard originally.
I know they're not perfect, John, but it's a contract for
Yeah.
cable service, so
No, I
we
understand.
can't put in a specific language that they
Right.
have to be responsive or
Right.
do something. We're dealing with the
Right.
public.
No, I
utility.
understand, I was in that business,
Yeah,
so
right.
that's where I grew up in.
Yeah.
And, but I'm just saying, had anything been discussed about the level of service?
No, they weren't giving us an SLA or service level agreement for our village. No, it's pretty much,
All right,
it's pretty much either you get cable or you don't have internet. Because there's nobody else around.
I mean,
So
if
it's kinda-
people have specific
Right,
complaints,
yeah.
we can reach out to the.
We
rep and
do
say,
have a rep, but
These are
yes.
the problems
yes.
that we're having and
Please help our
address them."
village,
So,
right?
Okay, do we have a named representative that
Sure
handles
you do.
this village?
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
I
the
think
woman
so.
was on
I
the
think so.
call.
I think
Kelly's
so.
not now.
So I just think if anyone has issues, they can contact the village and
Wow.
we do have a rep that we can call if it's a continuous
Yeah,
problem.
I remember it being, and this is going back maybe within the last 2 years, I remember it being,
Right.
and I just didn't know if it had been voice.
I know, this conversation started before we even
Oh, I
got
know.
elected, so
No, I know.
you shared this, but again, Brian had a lot of experience negotiating these contracts, and so like I said, we got a few extra perks this year, such as the $5,000 PEG grant, getting paid twice a year, and getting the Cablevision services for our 3 facilities, which we will now save that money.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, that was about the best we were getting. It's pretty boilerplate.
Okay.
Well, I gotta say, you know what, Dune Lane goes out a lot. So if we do have some cloud and we're talking to them now, I'm not on Dune Lane, but I know everybody that's down there and they seem to go out of cable a lot. And I don't know, they just, I mean, it's almost half a dozen times a year.
In
They're.
other words, you can count the times that they're on.
No, they're on, but you know what, if there's a storm or wind or something like that, whatever the infrastructure that's there setting up their cable, it's weak, so, you know, if we can do something.
They're running a
towards
lot
that.
of new buried, because it's all buried there, and they're running a lot of new buried stuff, so I think they're gonna all see some
Can
improvements.
you do me a favor and somebody, Robin, you can get me the name of the cable rep?
Sure.
Speak to, I'll
Mhm.
Sure.
talk
Great.
about that all the
No
time.
Right, okay.
Okay.
So can we have a motion?
Mayor? Oh, it's
There
Joan.
any
Yeah,
allowed-
hi, Joan.
Oh, okay, Robin, I just want to say, yes, we do have, I was the representative for cable for
Hi,
25 years, so I got to know the village pretty well. And Samantha, who was on before, she had to get off for other purposes. She's your contact, she's your direct contact. It's expected, so if something goes out, you should have her phone number.
Yes.
I can give Robin has my actually my
Great.
contact number, my cell number. So if something goes out, absolutely call us directly, and we can make sure that we would get to the outside plant people, which is where you have to get to the tech. So the
No,
outside-
I know the way it works. I was in that business for a long time, but.
Okay,
No, we didn't, no, we need a motion. We
I
did
need
have,
some-
so we have.
I have a motion, I need a second.
Second,
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Eugene, you want to read the next one?
okay, resolution, of the Board of Trustees of the Village of West Hampton Dunes adopting a new chapter 486 of the Code of the Village of West Hampton Dunes entitled Subdivision of Land and providing therein regulations pertaining to subdivision of land and establishing the constitution, procedure, powers of the planning board with respect to subdivision applications.
Second? Second. All those in favor?
I'll read the next one. Resolution to allow the mayor to attend NICOM 2025 annual meeting and training school at the Sagamore, May 28th to the 30th.
Second.
Second,
All those in favor?
resolution to schedule a public hearing for the 2026 budget hearing.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Resolution authorizing the village mayor to procure goods and services in accordance with the village procurement policy and the costs associated with improving and maintaining the condition of the village office building, such as an awning, lighting, repairs, painting, landscaping, plantings, and an aggregate amount not to exceed 15,000.
Second. All those in favor?
Okay, resolution requesting an amendment to New York State tax law to authorize the village to impose an occupancy tax.
Second.
All those in favor? Again, I'll just say, doesn't mean we're doing this,
We're not yet.
we're just putting in the infrastructure that if it's something we want to do in the future, it's available to us. Okay, now I'd like to open up the meeting for public comment. So please raise your hand and Robin will let you speak, or anyone here, or anybody here too.
Anyone? Chad?
Just a quick thing. It's Perm, so I also want to go. But and I know you do as well, Mayor. But just to jump off the discussion you had real quick about your work in trying to figure out ways to resolve the Bayside, well, flooding I think is probably not possible, but shoreline stabilization. Mayor, as you know, in the letter we raised to you, one of the things we brought up was the enforcement of the RAF agreement, specifically, that I really would like to put on everyone's radar that a key tool the village has lost under the prior administration. And I think, really considering the unique connections and skills of this particular mayor with his networking through the state and county, I think a renewed focus on renewing that general permit that is a covenant and restriction on every property in this village, that it is the village residents and the village itself are entitled to it, from the New York State DEC. It's something really should be brought to the forefront because it can be utilized. I mean, I have it in front of me just to put it in the record. The DEC is supposed to deliver and did deliver to the village a general permit to allow the building, rebuilding, or repair of structures, and to build new structures where there never had been a structure in compliance with the Tidal Wetlands Act and other applicable laws and regulations. And for the 20 years, there were two 10-year permits issued from when the RAF agreement was settled. It was a condition precedent to the settlement, and there were two 10-year terms. And then the DEC didn't renew it after that. And like I said, there was a struggle going on, and it just never got over the finish line. But before that, the village building inspector used to issue the permits that would have been in the purview of the DEC within the village boundary. And that's apropos of this conversation because, one of the biggest administrative burdens that individual landowners would have in installing, revetments or other structures, just shoreline restoration work generally, is in the DEC's jurisdiction, and it doesn't need to be. And especially considering that, I mean, the reason that that's there is because it was the constructive failure of the state to take action in this territory that caused the destruction of the village the first time. And that's why the landowners were keen to have these three powers vested in the village directly as opposed to with other authorities so that they could determine their own destiny. And I, as the owner of multiple bayfront properties, can attest to the fact that we've lost a lot of land again this winter. It's a situation that needs to be addressed. And I don't know that it needs to be done 100% where it's financed or even studied so much by the village as much as it just needs to be enforced and administered by the village and remove the bureaucracy as much as possible. So I ask that you guys study that. Where my father, myself, and anyone in our network are happy to consult on this and help with it. We've built many revetments. We do shoreline work all the time, and like I said, it's life or death, and it's really important that it gets focused on. And the RAF agreement has that tool and others like with Suffolk County Health that are not regularly enforced and often have to be pushed back on where Suffolk County Health doesn't abide by the standards either. So just ask that the village, maintain a sharp focus on that agreement, which as you all know, I'm sure, but maybe not everybody who's a resident knows, is a covenant and restriction recorded against every single deed in the village of West Hampton Dunes, and is a unique right and power that this village has.
Brad, you've been kind enough to bring this to my attention, a week or two ago about that thing that expired. I actually have a call with our council, former DEC council, I think tomorrow morning in reference to the RAF agreement. I would like to look at seeing if there's a way to get that thing renewed, and I don't know why it wasn't renewed, whether it was the DEC or again, the village dropped the ball in that situation. Another thing that I would like to put together is a committee of people that want to help us with the RAF agreement in terms of the Bayside, in terms of the Oceanside restoration and the agreement and everything else. So I think somebody like yourself or your dad and some other people in the village would be great assets to be on that committee to help us, thoroughly understand the RAF agreement. I also appreciate the fact that you do go to the Suffolk County Department of Health and educate them in terms of what we are allowed to do in this village and the exceptions we have in this village as compared to other places and why we have the right to do it, overriding some of their current rules and regulations. And yes, I think it's a living document that should have been updated previously, and we're working on updating it and using it to the advantage to benefit all the homeowners. So again, if you'd be interested, like I said, I'd like to get a few volunteers to form a committee to kind of work with us on this RAF agreement, what was there and how we use it going forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Whenever you're ready, we're ready. Thank you.
Any other new business? Okay, then I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight, and we're always available to reach any one of us, and we look forward to seeing you soon, and if not, at the budget meeting on April 10th. Have a good night.
Motion.
A motion to, somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second, all those in favor?
Raise my hand and say it.
Good night, everybody.
Are we offline?
Nope.
I